Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I'm your host, Cody Goodwin, back with our recruiting guru, Brett Greenberg, going to recap the first official visit weekend of the summer for Alabama. Had a lot of talented 2026 prospects and a handful more on campus this past weekend. It's the first of 5 really big recruiting weekends for the Crimson Tide and really for every other school around the country. And Brett has done a really good job just keeping everybody up on to date on things. If you're not on the Bama 247 board, I am again telling you that this is the time to be on it because Brett is literally spending his entire weekend tracking what their recruiting visits look like. And then he's taking the beginnings of his week to reach out to these kids and ask how the visits have been going. That's going to be on today's show. Before we get there, though, Brett, what the heck is up with the Braves, man?
I was literally, it's funny. I was literally just going to make a joke about you not bringing them up because they've been 3-9 since Acuna and Strider got back. But that's my answer. I don't know. We have a new third base coach who is a former manager. It is a mess. I've been to 3 games now this year. That's 27 innings. They've scored 3 total runs. I cannot stand it. Monday was great because there was no game and there was college baseball on. You're getting me going. You know how I feel.
I'm just like the combination of like talent and then like the brain trust that's in the dugouts. Like I know it's only June and it's early June at that, right? June 3rd is we're recording this, but like I feel like every time it's like, oh, they're kind of figuring it out, and then it's just like I don't know, like they're a very confounding baseball team.
It was only April, then it was only May. I mean, I can pull text up with my dad. I was like, now it's only June, so it's only going to be July, and it's we'll see, and maybe we'll become sellers at the deadline. I don't know. We'll see.
At the same time, though, like because it's only June, you hope they have one strong month to at least get back to level. And if you're a 500 going into July, like you have a shot, right? Like that's because of how long the season is. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like most Braves fans are just kind of irritated with this team.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of perfectly to put it. It's like, yeah, you said it right there. The roster's there. The pitching's there. Maybe you get one more guy, and if you can put together, I mean, they were 2 years ago, they were 10 and a half back from the Mets, which I like to remind a lot of my family members of a lot. But yeah, it's very, very, very frustrating for sure.
I will say, coming from Kansas City, they do a little bit more now because Kansas City is like they seem to have figured a few things out, and they've been playing some pretty good baseball the last few years. But like there's a long time where like people would check out of the Royals, right? And then they would kind of circle back in like mid-June and be like, okay, where are they at? Like, like they bring their head up out of water and it's like, they're, 10 games back. Okay, we're going to put our head back down and wait for football season to show up. Braves fans, man, I'll give them this. They live and die every single night, which is like amazing, but it's also like you can't do that to yourself, man.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
crazy.
I think you're being modest. I know, like, yeah, we're crazy. I understand that. We're lunatics. Going crazy about a game in an 8th inning in April is psychotic. But for the Royals, kind of just Jack Caglione coming up, who obviously he went to Florida in the SEC. I think a lot of Alabama baseball fans are familiar with him. He's just got called up. I think he's making his debut this weekend. He looks like he's going to be a really good player for a really long time.
He looks like he's going to be fun, and the Royals have been playing some good ball. I won't say great ball, but pretty good ball. They're a couple games above 500. And, hey, prime time to bring the rookie up because they're playing the Cardinals, right, in that I-70 series. So I know the Cardinals have been they've reverted to the mean a little bit, but they look like they got a pretty good squad this year. So that might be a fun little series. This won't be the last time they play, but good. If Caglione's in the lineup this week to play against the Cardinals, that would be a pretty fun atmosphere.
Oh, yeah, and just real quick, last thing on the Royals. I don't know what it was about that World Series. They were so likable. Like that was one of the more likable World Series teams I can remember that I've like watched, like other than obviously the Braves, like just and seeing pictures of them kind of reunite. I think they were like the Savannah Bananas or something. Like it was just awesome. Like Alex Gordon, like the Moose and just all those dudes. Like I don't know I just really like that team. Kind of a smaller market. Wasn't really the big names. I mean, they were obviously a very good team, but right. Yeah, they were fun to watch. They were really likable.
Yeah, they were the perfect combination of like the farm system did the job it was supposed to do. You had a lot of really good players, and then also like because they hadn't won in a really long time. Like I feel like when the Red Sox and Cubs finally figured it out and won their World Series, there were a lot of people that got behind them because it's like, oh, we haven't seen this in a really long time. It helps that they're in like 2 really big baseball markets. But yeah, I felt like that 2015 Royals squad, like it was like, oh, they haven't done this in a really long time. We're going to get behind those guys. So, which makes it harder for like the Yankees or the Braves or the Dodgers. Like nobody wants to see those guys win again, but also like they're super large markets. So I feel like people tune in like automatically. Speaking of rabid fan bases and the future of programs, we'll call it that. We're here to talk recruiting. I said a lot of it at the top already, so we're going to go ahead and dive into this first official visit weekend for Alabama this past weekend in Tuscaloosa. I'm going to start here at the top, Brett. What was maybe your biggest takeaway from Alabama's first official visit weekend?
Yeah, they started off kind of in a big way. 13 official visitors, a crucial unofficial visitor at quarterback, which we'll get into a little bit later in the show. But I think, and I said it in a couple radio hits as well, patience is kind of what I've kind of preaching right now. This was the first main official visit weekend, like Cody alluded to earlier in the show, for Alabama and for a lot of these kids. And a lot of these guys that Alabama is, battling out for, going against Ohio States and Michigans and USC's, and these recruits are going to go and take their official visits there throughout the month of June. So I continue most of them. Now there's going to be some guys maybe make some earlier decisions, but a lot of these guys seem to be kind of adamant on making sure they take their rest of their visits. Some already have commitment dates. Sincere Johnson, for example, who was on campus, is going to have commit on June 19th. But that's kind of my big takeaway. And then another thing was kind of nice to hear, similar to last year. A lot of these recruits were kind of blown away with like guys, coaches and staffers and janitors and kitchen staff knowing everything about them during these trips. Nolan Wilson, who I talked with last night. It's been a long week.
It's only Tuesday, Brett. Come on, man.
He talked about how like the whole staff knew all of his siblings' names and what they liked for dinner and things like that. So it was kind of that paying attention to detail and all hands on deck approach to everybody around that kind of stuck out last year, and it's very evident this year and seems to be holding a lot of weight early on.
Yeah, I like the line from Nolan. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but they're not just recruiting me. They're kind of recruiting my family too. They're making it so that it's not just me coming down here. It's that it's kind of an all-in investment. I really like that quote from him and just the way he was describing that. You talked about like the patience that and maybe how this is going to be a slow burn through the entire month and really, through this summer and even, I guess, into the fall too, before you're able to officially put pen to paper with a lot of these guys. How crucial is it that Alabama got as many of these guys on campus for the first official visit weekend? Like, how much weight does that carry?
I think it's huge. Now, I guess I kind of contradict myself in the earlier show and kind of what I was saying. Like, yeah, of course, you'd like to have every single guy to maybe close out the summer, of course. But like from what I'm being told, both from kind of near Alabama, kind of close to recruitments, and from these recruits themselves, like Alabama's setting the bar for a lot of these recruits, or kind of confirming their, hey, Alabama is my number one school going forward. A lot of these kids continue to say, like, yeah, I've always had these feelings about them, just kind of reignited those feelings. It was a family atmosphere. I'm very comfortable. A lot of these kids are making their second and third trips to campus, so they're very comfortable. This weekend was kind of very relaxed, got to really maybe dive a little bit deeper into their positions and meetings, things like that. But it was very family oriented, and that continues to be a thing around these official visits.
Yeah, I like that a lot. You mentioned Nolan Wilson. Let's start there. He was top 100 defensive lineman, one of many 4 or 5-star defensive players, we'll put it that way, that were on campus this weekend. And you had mentioned kind of as we were setting the table for what this month is going to bring, that you thought there was a shot that this class could probably veer defense heavy. And it seemed like that was pretty well established based on the guys who were on campus this weekend. There was Nolan Wilson, Sincere Johnson, the 4-star linebacker, Braden Rouse, another 4-star linebacker, and then Kevin Ford, 4-star edge. I believe he's from Duncanville, right? So he's him and that Keelan Russell connection. Seeing all of these defenders on campus, there's also a 5-star safety, and we'll touch on him in just a minute. I want to make sure he got his little separate conversation. Just whenever it comes to a 5-star, I'd like to make sure that we kind of break those guys out. But all of these high-profile blue-chip defensive players on campus this first weekend, what did you make of that? What did you make of kind of their experience, and what kind of message do you think Alabama sent with getting all these guys on campus pretty quickly?
Yeah, first take, it took us 10 minutes to mention Keelan Russell's name, which I think is probably a record on which is pretty good.
Hey, man, he's part of the team now. We don't, these are recruiting pods.
100%. Right. Exactly. But yeah, like you said, you alluded to last show, it kind of seems like this class is going to be defensive heavy. 4 of the 5 commitments are on the defensive side of the ball. 2 of those are kind of those defensive line edge, Wolf, still trying to figure out, some of these guys' bodies are still transforming. Kamari and Johnson, Jamari Matthews both do look like they're going to probably play the bandit position. But Alabama's not done in that room. And like you said, it was evident by the amount of guys on campus this weekend and the amount of guys that are to continue to come to campus throughout the summer. But yeah, Nolan Wilson's kind of a guy that I was watching closely before the weekend, continue to watch closely. We talked with him. We talked about him briefly for a second there and what he was talking about. But I want to point out that Alabama was his very first offer. Unranked kid he talked about, he's like, I was a nobody out of lower Mississippi. Freddie Roach watched my film and that's all they watch. And they gave me an offer and he comes to visit and, fast forward many months, many trips later, and Alabama continues to be the leader for Nolan Wilson ahead of a big summer, a couple more visits, but I continue to like where Alabama stands. And that's just another kind of example of this staff getting early eval and holding a lot of weight in the summer. Another one is Big Titan Davis, who seems to be kind of a fan favorite already on our board, on social media, kind of everywhere I'm seeing. Number one, probably for the name Titan. Number two, from St. Louis. I think there's kind of a general consensus. Those guys are pretty tough, pretty good football players, and he's 6'5" at the defensive line position. So that checks Cody's box right there. He's a guy that I'm still trying to connect with personally, but Alabama's continued to do a good job there, battling out with some other heavy hitters. But Alabama, I think, is continuing to give him plenty to think about and is in a good position going forward. Another guy that I'm tracking very, very closely is Sincere Johnson, again, with that June 19th commitment date, an official visit to Ohio State locked in for a couple weeks from now. And then 6 days later, he'll make his decision. Continue to hear Alabama's pushing all the right buttons. Now, Ohio State, that Glenville High School to Ohio State, was hearing about that yesterday. Very, very strong connection. So Buckeyes are a strong contender, have always been, will continue to be, but Alabama is certainly making the Buckeyes sweat for it for sure.
I wanted to circle back on Nolan Wilson because this is a name that Alabama fans have probably known for quite a while. You had mentioned the importance of Alabama being in on him, literally being the very first team on him. And he seems to, yes, Alabama's probably his front runner school right now, still going to take a handful of visits. But I wanted to ask you, when it came to importance of defensive linemen, I don't think we need to tell people how important it is to have, as many top 100 defensive linemen as you can get. When you look at a handful of the last national champs, right? Ohio State, Michigan, the way Georgia was able to rattle off back-to-back titles, like they did a lot of it through the trenches, right? And I'm not
championships.
Exactly, right? Well, and I wanted to ask you, do you happen to know when who the last top 100 defensive lineman that Alabama signed was?
James Smith.
Good call, man. You're good at this.
Is that it? Is that it?
That was in 2023. James Smith was, I pulled this up here, just quick research. He was the number 41 overall player in the 2023 class, 4-star defensive lineman. That was the last time Alabama signed a top 100 defensive lineman, which you're shaking your head. I imagine people that are listening are like, has it really been that long? Yes, it has, right? And I'm not counting transfers here. I'm counting specifically guys that they recruited and that they signed. So Nolan Wilson, I think, could potentially represent a lot more than just a guy that Alabama was there quite literally start to finish when it comes to the recruiting process. Like it's been a minute since they've been able to get that position or that type of talent at that position, which, when you're talking Alabama, one, that's kind of crazy to think about, but two, like that could be a really good sign in establishing a foundation moving forward as they continue to build out the defensive players in this class, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I knew it was James Smith. I didn't realize it was 2023 or whatever class you said it was. That's pretty crazy. I mean, I think Alex had a kind of a deep dive into that defensive line recruiting as well. So yeah, like you said, Nolan Wilson would be certainly a good add and potential. Still a long way to go until the final ranking. So that guy has potential to, continue to climb. Some of these 4-stars have potential to continue to climb as well.
Another defensive player that was on campus this weekend, 5-star safety Jet Washington. He sounds like he had a little bit of a schedule change, but that may have worked out in Alabama's favor, right? He didn't get there till Saturday, but he stayed through Monday when vast majority of these guys had already gone home. So Alabama got a lot of one-on-one time with this guy. And you got to think the way that Mo Linguist likes to recruit, the way he likes to connect with a lot of these guys. I say Mo specifically, obviously, because he's the secondaries coach, defensive backs coach. You get Mo one-on-one time with a 5-star safety, That's got to be a good thing, right? What have you been hearing about Jet Washington's weekend, the recruitment, and just kind of where the tide stand?
Yeah, I woke up from a text from him this morning saying the trip went great. Going to have plenty more with him either later tonight or tomorrow morning. Kind of that Las Vegas to Atlanta time zone is a little bit difficult to deal with these California guys, but our Blair Angulo, who does a great job out west as well, had a great write-up with him. Alabama, he said, I'm going to pull up the exact quote just because, you said he is a 5-star and he's worth, kind of having the exact right, thoughts for him. It said, Alabama is definitely up there and I feel better about them each time I get up there. So Alabama continuing to push the right buttons. Again, we continue to bring up Oregon with this. The nephew of Kobe Bryant, I think there's some connections there just with Phil Knight and kind of that history, if you will. But Alabama's certainly making Jet Washington think. And again, he's a guy that Alabama is fit. He fits Alabama and what they want. 6'5", 200. I like to throw that out every single time I like to talk about him.
Another Monstar for Mo Linguist's secondary.
100%. And Mo Linguist kind of kick-started things and continued to do a great job with Jet Washington. But it's Jason Jones also in the safe and who's in the secondary coach as well. That's really kind of taken it up a notch. And it was you talk about that one-on-one time, but it's Coach Mo, Jason Jones, other staffers, Courtney Morgan, Kalen DeBoer, Xavier Brown, Damani Jackson, all these other guys around Jet Washington. So like you said, the little bit of I'm not totally sure if always was the plan to show up Saturday morning. I think it was to show up late Friday. But like you said, I think that ended up probably helping Alabama, working out a little bit more in their favor, going to the couple other trips. Now he's going to go to USC and he's going to go to Oregon and Ohio State, but Oregon kind of still feels like the main team to watch. But you can't really ask for a better position for Alabama. Again, this is not a kid that was going to come in and commit right away. He's going to take his official visits. He knows he's going to enjoy this process. He's one of the best players in the country, and Alabama is squarely kind of in the mix for him.
That's awesome. I know what Alabama's selling point is, right? You've got Mo, you've got the fact that the secondary turned over in a year. You've seen the development piece of a lot of these guys. That's really easy to sell. One thing that you made mention in your kind of notes and wrap and just kind of quick hitters of all the guys that came to campus this weekend, specifically as it pertains to Jet Washington, Oregon is probably the primary team, and Oregon's also going to get the last visit of this guy later this month. So that leads me to wonder, how big is the NIL piece when it comes to this guy's recruitment? Like how big of a factor do you think that's going to be? Do you have a sense of that, or is it still maybe too early to tell?
Yeah, it's still kind of tough now. It's, again, we've been in this NIL space for a while, but it's still kind of that awkward conversation or, inquiry to have with some of these kids or parents or things like that. Now, again, everybody, money talks and things like that, but I don't believe Jet Washington and a lot of these guys, I talk about this again on the Ryan Fowler show. Like a lot of these guys Alabama's going after, yes, money's a factor, but they're focused on getting to the next level. And they understand that programs like the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Georgias, and so on and so forth, the Oregons, like you said, can help me attain that. And that's a big factor in my decision-making as well. So I think, and the other side of it is, I don't think Alabama is going after guys that are purely based off money. We've had a couple instances of that over the last 2 cycles as well. So I don't think that's a huge determining factor. Again, there's probably a little bit more connection to Nike in that aspect. But what Jet Washington has continued to say for close to a year is the relationships he has with a Courtney Morgan and a Mo Linguist and now Jason Jones and pretty much everyone else on campus. Derek Meadows, who was huge, spent a lot of time with him, of course, this weekend was, again, we talked about this earlier show, was with him before the trip as well, out in Las Vegas training. They're in each other's ear. Xavier Brown, I think, was very big this weekend as well, because one thing I think, is not talked about enough that I don't talk about either is it's a culture change for a lot of these kids. I mean, Xavier Brown's going from California to Tuscaloosa. You're going from Kansas City to Tuscaloosa. Everything's different. So Jet Washington's going from hey, what is it like? Can I fit in here? And Xavier Brown clearly does, and I'm sure clearly had some very good things to say. So that certainly helps. And you talk about the on-field production that's speaking to them. Xavier Brown is good as it gets as a freshman in the SEC.
Yeah, well, and he's at corner, right? Jet Washington's probably going to play safety. So you
Yep.
look at a guy like Keon Sabb, right? New Jersey to Michigan to Alabama. Bray Hubbard from he's from the South, but Bray's probably a prime example of that development piece, right? And he's done it over a couple different coaching staffs. So that's a good point. Just the idea of the culture fit, and he's got, I think, what'd you say? He's got 3 more visits at the end of this month. Oregon's going to get the last visit. Every time I think Oregon, I always think like Phil Knight's just kind of waiting there at the end of the visit, going, "All right, how much they offer you? Here's a blank check. Let's write a bigger number," right? So, when it comes to a guy like this, and how Alabama stacks up NIL wise, and I wonder how much that'll change with the whole rev share coming down. I know that's our conversation. I feel like Mike and Alex and I have every other podcast just because of the ongoing off the field stuff when it comes to college football. But because Oregon's in the picture, it's an easy thing to come to mind. So I felt like I had to ask.
Right. And I kind of still on topic, but like I'm almost like not dreaming, but like looking at a secondary of like a junior year Xavier Brown, a sophomore year Dijon Lee, Zay Mincy, a Jet Washington, a Jordan Edwards. It's
Ivan
like,
Taylor and all these
Taylor,
other dudes. Yeah.
It's oof.
Stack the
No
room.
disrespect to no one I didn't name because Ivan Taylor. I don't forget about it. It's just woof.
Stack the room. Those are a lot of the defensive guys. I did want to circle back because Alabama also, they're still paying attention to the guys on offense. And specifically the thing that maybe came out of this weekend, at least to me, handful of pretty good receivers. Talk about the job Mo Linguist has done with the defensive backs. Jamarcus Shepard continues to do a lot of really good work with the receivers. Couple of receivers that were on campus this weekend. Ethan Feaster, who's out of Texas, believe that's Booby Feaster, right? Like that's the popular name. A lot of really good nicknames that Alabama's going after. So I can appreciate that.
The dad was ahead of the game in NIL, I guess.
And so you have Booby Feaster, and then you've also got Kenny Darby, who's an LSU receiver commit, but Alabama being able to get him on campus. Those are 2 4-star guys, 4 wildly talented guys that a lot of programs are after. What did you make of the big name receivers that made it to campus? But then also, they're maybe not the top targets in this class, but they are guys that Alabama really, really wants. Just what did you make of the receivers that made it to campus this first weekend, and just how Alabama's attacking that position this summer?
Yeah, to come off kind of Cody's end point there, Sadarian Morgan is the top target. There's no doubt about it. He's going to head his very, very busy official visit schedule in Tuscaloosa. I think I shared a note that like he's kind of gives Caleb Cunningham vibes in the terms of every school might be number 1 coming out of every trip because as you might be aware, every school is probably going to roll out the red carpet for the 6'4" number 2 receiver in the country who weighs 220 plus pounds.
As they should.
as they should, and as he should enjoy himself. But Alabama, yeah, that's a top fish. And it's kind of, hey, where's Alabama looking? I know they want to get 1 to 2, maybe a third in the class. Again, you're going to maybe lose some guys after this 2025 season. You start hearing about Ethan Feaster and Kenny Darby over the last couple of months. And kind of the overall takeaway from these 2 is Alabama is very much in the mix, and probably more than I believed going into the visit and even coming out before talking to these kids. In the middle of the visit, Kenny Darby actually confirmed and shared that he's going to have a new final decision on July 4th after his LSU official visit. So that's kind of the new age of LSU commits going to have a final decision between Alabama and LSU. I just kind of said that aloud and had to read that back. I had to say that back.
I've made a decision, but I'm going to finalize my decision at the end of, or I guess next month. But
right. And again, the other side of it is you should absolutely take visits if you want to. So
yes.
But maybe don't be whatever. Anyway,
I think that was Brett's first get off my lawn moment.
I've been watching too much Alex, Cody, and Mike.
Welcome to the dark side.
Kenny Darby specifically, he's a guy that Alabama's kind of quietly been talking to behind the scenes for a while. We talked about earlier in the show. He got down for an April visit, was enough to lock in an official visit. Jamarcus Shepard went and saw him in Louisiana multiple times during the spring contact period. And for him to come out and say in the middle of the visit, hey, I'm going to make a new final decision. Clearly, Alabama's giving him a lot to think about. Spoke with him for a little bit last night and this morning. Going to have more up on Bama 247. But he's just kind of, again, it's the coach's energies, coaches being around him, current players being around him, Ryan Williams being around him, kind of the proof in the pudding there. Keelan Russell in his ear. So Alabama's certainly given a lot to think about. Now LSU and their receivers, we know the history there, and they got him locked in early, if you will, last fall. They do not want to lose him, from my understanding. Why would you want to lose a kid like that? So Alabama is going to be kind of in a dogfight there, probably working from behind just because that established relationship, or they are working from behind that established relationship with the Tigers. But that's one that I'm, now kind of, all right, what's Darby up to? A little bit more often, and then certainly for Ethan Booby Feaster as well, a top four of LSU, A&M, Alabama, and I can't even remember the other school, but that's kind of the three I'm kind of more focusing on. LSU is, I'm going to keep bringing them up, but Darby with LSU, they got 3 commitments. Tristan Keys is committed there, who's the number 1 receiver, who's actually has an official visit to Alabama locked in. That's kind of new. So LSU's kind of got some, I don't really envision him moving on from the Tigers, but there's some kind of dominoes that could fall. But Ethan Feaster, man, was former 7-on-7 teammates with Keelan Russell out in Texas. So kind of got that connection there. Have put it on the board multiple times, and kind of when he first became a name to really track and continue to do so. Aaron Hodges, who's the associate director of player personnel at Alabama, was the first to offer this kid in 8th grade at TCU in his position. So that's, you talk about established relationships and things like that. That's certainly playing a big part. Alabama seems to be kind of continuing to chip away and be squarely in the mix for that guy. And you talk about NIL, I kind of get a little bit more vibe that may play a little bit more of a role in this recruitment. Now, it's gonna, I only say that because, again, Sadarian Morgan's kind of going to be your big fish. You may be willing to put up a little bit more for him, and it may be a little bit more difficult to go after kind of those higher ranked guys. And which kind of leads me into my next wide receiver tangent. Alabama actually offered a 6'3" receiver yesterday out of Nashville, Owen Cable, turning a 10.76 100-meter dash recently. Got up and worked at Alabama. Some not so good reactions on our board, believe it or not, about this. But I think anytime a wide receiver or anybody is going to go and get an offer in person after an in-person evaluation on campus, and this staff, if you believe in this staff, I think you should like it. Look at, Nolan Wilson. Again, he's not in the class yet, but that was a pretty good eval. Chris Booker, he's in the class. That's a pretty good eval. So I think Alabama, he's got a couple other offers, and I think maybe you could see them continue to roll in, and should have more with him soon.
Yeah. An important note that you made kind of in your weekend wrap was that there are a lot of dominoes at the receiver position that have yet to fall. And that is something that you are going to be paying very close attention to as these guys start hitting their commitment dates and they start making some decisions, perhaps this summer, perhaps during the fall. But there's a lot of movement left when it comes to the receivers in this class.
Well, yeah. And the final note to that, it's a lot of them are committed, but now these 5 stars and the receivers, and say what you will about the receivers, and they're kind of diva, however you want to describe kind of how they are, and just kind of perceived, whether I believe it or not. But they're going to take visits elsewhere. I mean, Tristan Keys was at Miami, and you talk about NIL, and LSU's not going to want to lose this kid, but Miami just went out and got a Jackson Cantwell over some other big heavy hitters. So there's a lot of heavy hitters involved. There's a lot of 5 stars. Sadarian Morgan, Tristan Keys are kind of those 2 main guys that everybody's going after. And Alabama is set to host both of them later this month. So it should be a fun time on the receiver room. Receiver room.
Sadarian Morgan, an Alexander City, Alabama native. So those of you guys that love the in-state recruits, there's a big fish for you. Another point that I wanted to get to when it came to the offense was a quarterback conversation, or at least we got to have this discussion, right? Because Jet Thamala, who is an Iowa State commitment from Omaha, 4-star guy, he was on campus for an unofficial visit this past weekend. And I believe it's the first of consecutive weekends that Alabama is going to have a quarterback on campus, whether it's official or an unofficial visit. And I guess let me start here when it comes to the quarterback conversation, Brett. Keelan Russell's already in the room. He's a true freshman. We're not 100% sure if he's going to be the starter this year or how much he's actually going to play this year. But when you bring in a guy as good as Keelan Russell, you know he's going to be the guy at some point. I understand why Alabama is recruiting other quarterbacks. I guess the question is, why would these quarterbacks consider Alabama if they know that Keelan Russell is going to be the dude for the next couple of years? Can you walk me through that? What's this been like? What are your thoughts on Alabama continuing to go after, I mean, not just any quarterbacks, like these guys are pretty good, right? Jet Thamala, Ponitowski, is that he'll be on campus next week. Matthew Ponitowski, who's also a standout baseball player, but that might be a separate conversation. But like these are pretty good quarterbacks that Alabama's bringing to campus with Keelan Russell already in the room. What's going on here?
I think it's a twofold answer. I think one, I'll start with the recruits. They're clearly show they're not scared. Now, whether they are going to, end up committing and challenging Keelan, that's a separate conversation for a separate day for you, Alex and Cody, should that happen, down the road. But I think it's, you talk to both of them, and I've asked them both, and they both acknowledge it. And Alabama staff has been very open. They're open with everybody about how many kids they want in each position. And, hey, we have you. We were looking at one more guy, and so on and so forth. They're very open about Keelan. Everybody knows in that facility kind of what the future of this program looks like under center. And these kids, they're not stupid. They're two very, very, very smart guys that have had new opportunities open up, and they're taking some very methodical approaches to this. So that's one side of it. And then the other side of it is the Alabama staff. They go in and get a Keelan Russell, but they're attracting two very, very, very good quarterbacks after doing that. And that's to their success. Both of them have talked about how they've had success at every step of the way. Nick Sheridan, Ryan Grubb, Kalen DeBoer, those three, what they did at Washington, Fresno State, Seattle, wherever, everywhere in between is resonating, and they know they can be developed at Alabama. So I think that's kind of a combination of the two.
So what do we make of Jet Thamala's? It was an unofficial visit, so maybe he didn't get to see all the bells and whistles as some of these other guys that we've been discussing in this show, but he was able to see a lot. He is already committed to Iowa State. It doesn't sound like he is going to waver too much on that, but I think in the story that you wrote, Alabama's given him quite a bit to think about. What'd you make of his visit and what he told you?
Yeah, and they kind of had a very successful trip. I think a very successful trip is a flip on the spot. That was never going to happen. Iowa State is always set to get an official visit this coming weekend, June 6th through 8th. Confirmed that's still going to happen. This is a kid from Omaha, Nebraska. Iowa State, I think, is 2 hours away. You might know that area a little bit better than I.
2.5-ish. So you got to go to Des Moines and then up to Ames.
So close to home. This is a program that was, we talk about Alabama's early evals. Iowa State in on him early, commitment somewhat early. He's been very respectful about this prospect. He keeps bringing up that respect part. But at the same time, he did not want to go throughout this process without visiting Alabama if he had an opportunity to do so. He did. And this staff with those three and being around Austin Mack, who is probably one of the better advocates for those three offensive coaches I named, because they convinced him to graduate a year early and come to Washington, then come to Alabama. He was around him. So that trip, like you said, is giving him a lot to think about. This is the quote he used. I don't want to mess it up, so I'm kind of going to use it verbatim. I'm going to go there, meaning Iowa State. In my head, I'm still committed to Iowa State because I am. I'm going to go to this official visit and see how that goes. I'll for sure have a decision to make a couple weeks after that. So Iowa State, again, is home, so to speak, for him, and those coaching staff. Again, he kind of makes it clear to me, continue to do a great job in kind of constant contact. They knew he was going to Alabama. Now they know they kind of have a battle on their hands now, and they certainly like to shut things down this weekend. And we'll see if that happens, but it's going to be one to continue to follow for sure.
Yeah, Jet Thamala, again, 4-star from Omaha. The other quarterback to keep an eye on in this class, Matt Ponitowski, 3-star guy from Cincinnati. And then also we mentioned he's a heck of a baseball player too, so that might be something that plays into his recruitment. But I wanted to kind of take that and spin this forward just with future, I mean, not even future, like this next upcoming weekend for Alabama. There are a lot of rock star players that are going to be making their way back to campus. A lot of guys, again, on the defensive side of the ball, including 3 commitments, 5-star cornerback Jordan Edmonds, 4-star edge defender Jamarian Matthews, and 3-star defensive lineman Kamarian Johnson, another in-state kid from Muscle Shoals. But then you look at some of the other visitors that are going to be here, and the thing that really sticks out to me, Brett, 5-star linebacker Xavier Griffin from Gainesville, Georgia, and then 5-star safety, am I pronouncing this right, Jari Edwards from Upper Marlboro, Maryland? Jira Edwards. So you're going to have 3 5-stars on campus next weekend. That is 10% of 24/7's 5-star allotment for the 2026 class. There's a lot of other dudes that are going to join these guys on campus, like Derek Cooper, running back from Hollywood, Florida, Jaquez Wilkes from Alabama, Kamari Brooks from Georgia, a couple of edge guys, also a defensive lineman, Kendall Jerville. Am I pronouncing that correctly, from Florida?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Caden Protho from Georgia, 4-star tight end. So lots of dudes that are going to be on campus next weekend, kind of headlined by the 3 5-star guys. Just at this early juncture, I know you're still talking to kids that were just on campus, but at some point you're going to flip the page and talk to the guys that are going to be coming on campus. Would you consider next weekend an even bigger visit weekend for Alabama compared to what we just experienced? Or how do you take stock of what's coming next for Alabama on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I think I guess, I mean, I've kind of gone back and forth, but yeah, I am ready to kind of say this is a bigger weekend. One, because you're getting your 3 commitments back on campus, and if you could potentially shut things down. Now, these are 3 kids that Jamarian Matthews was at Auburn last weekend, but I don't really see him taking a lot of other trips. Kamarian Johnson probably going to take a couple other trips. Jordan Edmonds, if you remember, our readers remember, moved up his official visit to be this weekend, to be around other commitments and be around Xavier Griffin. So that's a big deal. I feel very, very good about Alabama's chances to hold on to them. Nothing's really changed there. But yeah, Xavier Griffin, kind of the big fish, number 1 linebacker. No doubt, kind of all eyes on him. Was at Ohio State over the weekend. Heard very good things about that trip there, but I continue to kind of like where Alabama stands. Shared similar note. Texas is going to host him the weekend after that, then Florida State before June 29th commitment. Texas is certainly one I'm also kind of focusing on as well. Not sure how much NIL is going to be a focus on this. Now, I don't get that sense from him or that the mom that it's going to be kind of the biggest deal. Now, there are Alabama natives. He's got an uncle in Tuscaloosa. There's a lot of connections, and so it should be a fun weekend overall in Tuscaloosa for him. And for Jamarian Matthews, who they're very good friends, they're Gainesville high school teammates, and they're certainly going to be going back and forth trying to get him committed. Should have more on that before that trip, like you alluded to. Jair Edwards, another guy, 5-star safety. I believe he's 6'1", 200+ pounds. So another kind of those type guys you're looking at. Was at Auburn for an official visit over the weekend. Shared a similar note. Auburn seems to be doing a pretty good job with him as well, but Alabama's squarely in the mix. And you talk about how much NIL is going to play a factor. It's going to be interesting. I mean, he's talked about to multiple guys, like, I'm focused on a gold jacket, and that's NFL Hall of Fame. So he's kind of has that mindset. But again, money talks all the time. So it's going to be interesting. One I'm really circling on the defensive side, around that defensive line, maybe Bandit Wolf, more of that Wolf look, is Kamari Brooks out of Georgia. Lives 20 minutes away from Athens, was back for an official visit over the weekend for his, 150th time in Athens throughout his recruitment. I'd say it's a win, considering there isn't, a public commitment or anything out there, or anything that I've learned about Georgia securing something. He's going through this Alabama official visit. Now, I will say, I think Alabama continues to be behind. It's kind of, I would maybe frame it in, kind of an Anthony Jones type, like, he's so close to Alabama. He goes there all the time. Alabama seems to be in a good stops, and that's kind of the same for Kamari Brooks in Georgia, just the connections. And David Pollock, who's one of the greater Georgia linebackers in program history, is actually a coach at North Oconee, so there's some connections there. I remember being North Oconee, a lot of Georgia G's around, so there's a lot of connections as well. And then kind of just to circle back to your quarterback point, Matt Ponatowski actually, able to confirm he's going to be in town as well for an official visit this coming weekend, which is a big deal, because you throw back to Jet Tamala, kind of getting back to Iowa State. Matt Ponatowski coming to Alabama, has got a couple other official visits set up. He'll get to Oregon as well. So it could be a kind of, hey, who wants to make a decision first type of thing. From my understanding, both seem to be kind of, hey, we want you. You're in that category, and it seems evident by getting these guys to campus as well. So it's going to be fun weekend on the defensive side of the ball, and certainly kind of tires are rotating at quarterback, and should be a lot more clear after the weekend.
Absolutely. Monster weekend coming up for Alabama. Monster weekend just wrapped up for Alabama, the first of 5 consecutive recruiting weekends for the Crimson Tide. Brett, very clearly staying on top of everything. Before we get out of here, Brett, any other lingering thoughts or notebook items that you just kind of want to get off your chest, whether it's, kind of recapping last weekend or looking ahead to this coming weekend?
I'm trying to think. As soon as we log off, I'll think of something. But most of those lingering thoughts are like Cody alluded to, in kind of a big old notebook on Bama 247, and we've got a great kind of thread of the whole summer, and pre-visit, post-visit reactions, and other position boards and other things like that. So anything else I can think of will be put on that thread, and anything like that. So it's going to be a fun couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Fun and busy couple of weeks, especially for Brett. You heard all the information that tumbles out of his brain whenever he's on Roll Pod, and that is going to be what it's going to be for the next month or so. Like I've said before, and I'll say it again here, we're going to have Brett on at least once a week, maybe sometimes more, depending on the gravity of the official visit weekends. But we're going to have him on to kind of brain dump each weekend of Alabama's official visit summer, I suppose we'll call it, over the next month, just giving us intel on what he's learned, what the experiences were like for the kids. And we hope you'll continue to tune in, because we're going to rely on Brett quite a bit on Roll Pod this upcoming month. That's all we've got really for today, guys. We will be back next week to discuss even more recruiting from what's going to be an even bigger recruiting weekend for Alabama. So we're going to have Brett back on early next week to discuss what it was like for the 3 5-stars that are on campus. I think it's rare. Is it rare, Brett, that one school is able to get 3 of the 32 5-star guys on campus in the same weekend, or am I just like blowing that up in my head?
I don't know if it's rare. I think if you're Alabama, you have the ability to do it. I
guess it's not rare for Alabama. Like I
don't know if it's that rare for the programs that Alabama and the other programs that these kids are kind of visiting. So, but that's not to discredit this guest list. I mean, it's 13 guys right now. Actually, real-time news, but I'll probably put it on the board before this comes out. Darrell Bell is actually not going to be visiting. So, I guess I kind of portrayed that to be exciting news, but no, he will no longer be taking official visit this weekend. I think him and Alabama kind of no longer really, kind of going forward with this recruitment. So it's kind of my final note.
Breaking news from Brett Greenberg on Roll Pod. So even if it's going to come out an hour after he said something, because I've got some slight editing to do to make sure that we both sound really, really good. But that is, we'll be back again next week to recap what is expected to be a very, very big recruiting weekend, the second recruiting weekend for Alabama this month. So in the meantime, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 24/7 Sports. Guys, I say it every single time Brett's on the show. Every single thing he writes outside of a commitment is behind the paywall. So if you want more of Brett's recruiting intel, you need to buy a Bama 247 subscription. I put a link to do that in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We will talk to you all again soon.
See you guys.